Welcome back to The Rough Draft, a show for writers by writers with a specific focus on the platform medium. Today's guest is a professor, a race scholar, an activist, a keynote speaker, a consultant. She has been published in The Ascent, in Invisible Illness, in Age of Awareness, and off medium in Forbes, Healthline, and Vox. She truly is a name to know, and she is doing some of the most brilliant work that I've come across. Join me in welcoming to The Rough Draft, Dr. Maia Hoskin. Dr. Maia Hoskin, thank you so much for joining me on The Rough Draft today.
Thanks for having me.
It's the obvious next step in our relationship. We've emailed back and forth, had a couple phone calls, and it makes sense that video chat is the next thing that we've graduated into. And whenever travel restrictions are lifted in the next year or two, I'm sure that'll be coffee next. But we'll make do with this and have an awesome time doing it. I want to start with discovering you and specific to your writing history. I'm no fool, so I know you've been writing for longer than just what's on Medium because of how brilliant your pieces are. Where have you been? Have you been publishing out other places, invested in teaching and speaking? Is this a new medium for you?
My background, I am a college professor. I teach graduate level students counseling, actually, so that they can go on and be MFTs and mental health therapists and whatnot. So a lot of my writing background centers around more academic, scholarly research. And that's kind of like the meat and potatoes of kind of like being a professor in that realm of writing. I recently decided in the beginning of the year to take a break from conducting research. So with that said, I have published several articles in more scholarly journals prior to beginning writing on Medium. And so I've published maybe 4 book chapters in scholarly texts. And I published 7 journal articles in more academic scholarly publications, peer-reviewed national scholarly publications. And so in the beginning of the year, I was just kind of burnt out with the whole research thing because it's very different, from, medium or freelance type writing. It's very exhausting, because you have to create, you have to conduct this huge research study before you actually write anything on it, essentially, or at least write your findings. And so I was like, I want to take a break, and it was only supposed to be 2 months, and it's definitely turned into something much longer than 2 months. And I've actually found a freedom in it that I did not have doing the whole kind of rat race of scholarly writing in academia that I really like. And so that is my background. And so I started writing on Medium, I want to say in the beginning of February,
Yes, right.
The second week of February, around Valentine's Day, somewhere around there. And I first wrote in Invisible Illness. That was my first article in Invisible Illness.
And how have, beyond the freedom and the stylistic differences, how has the first 2-3 months on Medium been? What have you discovered? What are you still discovering?
Well, I think that Medium is a very interesting beast, figuring out, because, essentially, I guess there's several types of people who are on Medium, right? The people who just want to kind of express themselves and use this as an outlet, and they're really not interested in how many claps they get or how, how widespread their story goes or how much money they make. And then there are people who are like, I'm all about the money. I want to get the most claps. I want to get the most reads. I want to get the most money I can. And then people who are somewhere in the middle. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle of all of that. And so I think that's the hard part. Well, not the hard part, but the interesting part of learning how to be in the middle of that, how, because it does matter to me who reads, my work, otherwise I wouldn't be writing it. I want people to read it. So I think, it's been an ongoing learning process of figuring out, okay, what are the main tools or, what are the main strategies I should implement or incorporate to get my stories read by as many people as possible. And, and accepted by as many publications. And then looking at, okay, in terms of publications, which is the best fit? Mm-hmm. When do I kind of bump up to larger publications with more, viewers or members? And so I think that that's the main piece of how to get your work out there and what do Medium readers want to read and how to align that with what you want to write. So not only just writing, because when I first started, I read all these articles about people like, kind of just pulling topics out their behind based off of what they felt Medium readers wanted to. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to write about what is important to me and what I'm passionate about. And so for me, it's been, okay, how do I balance that with what I feel like is actually important to Medium readers, or at least a group of Medium readers. So I think that's been the main part of the learning process of learning the reader, learning the platform, learning the publications, learning how to advertise my stories on my own through my own social media platforms, and then also learning how to get curated.
How are you distributing your work and marketing it out across your social media platforms? What's your approach to going off Medium to try to bring people back to Medium?
Right, everything. So I have a website, so I put my stories on my website. I use Instagram. I use my Twitter. I use Facebook. Also, what's really interesting, and I realized this maybe about 2 months ago, Medium has tons of Facebook groups. I want to say there's like 15, but I'm a member of maybe 5 different Facebook groups for Medium writers. And, every other day, various groups will say, post your newest story or post your most recent story or whatever. And I've gotten a lot of people who followed me on Medium as a result of that and who, enjoyed my stories. And so I think that the Facebook groups have been a tremendous help. But, also, like I said, other social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, and even LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn page where I'll post some of my stories as well. So all social media platforms is, my typical go-to.
Earlier, you talked about graduating out of and into new publications. You've published in The Ascent, you've published in Invisible Illness, you've published in Age of Awareness. What are the next publications that you're looking to get into?
Well, okay, so this is an interesting question because I've been trying to get into for like ever. So Zora, mm-hmm. Level, mm-hmm. Jen, mm-hmm. and it's funny because I've just pitched all 3 here like in the last week and a half.
Okay.
And I've even made contact with an editor at Level, almost begging them, please just read it. Just read. It's difficult. And I think for me going into this, I didn't realize how difficult it would be. Mm-hmm. I thought like, I'll just, email them an idea and I should hear back, I guess. And no, absolutely not. So
you're right. It's getting competitive.
Absolutely.
Which is great. I think it's great for us because it forces us to produce better quality. And it forces us to up-level our work. but trust that you have written some of the most impactful pieces I've read, excuse me, on Medium, and I mean that wholeheartedly. With your writing style, there are some markers of your writing. You know, you're gonna have brilliant pieces on racial and social issues, but also when reading your work, I feel as if I'm in the classroom with you. I feel as if it's a lecture or a performance because you bring us through with, you know, three paragraphs of stats and facts, and then you'll switch it to a more casual voice and say, okay, listen up. Now, why is this important?
Right.
You pull up and then you'll come back in. Is this intentional?
No. Yes, it's just how I've been trained to write. I've just been trained to write because of the background, the academic background of you just can't just say, I feel this way because this is the way I feel. I mean, I guess you can, but it's more impactful if you have actual research that can back up what you're saying and you can make a case for why this matters. And so I think naturally when I'm writing, that just comes out, just that natural tendency to say, okay, you know, like I recently, well, this was about a month or 2 months ago, where I wrote about cultural appropriation, and, you know, it wasn't enough for me to just say, I think it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like shame on you if you're misappropriating, you know, a culture that's not your own. It was more so, yeah, shame on you, but this is why shame on you, right? This is why, you know, members of the Black community are, you know, as my grandmother would say, fit to be tied, or, you know, really upset over people misappropriating our culture, you know, because we've experienced historical discrimination in X, Y, and Z ways. This is why it's not just about, oh, it's just a hairstyle, get over it, or it's just a this, get over it. There's historical context, there's roots to this. And so without, you know, including those important pieces, you know, it kind of just is like, you know, an opinion that just falls flat, that, you know, can be dismissed. So I feel like it's really important to incorporate those, you know, those kind of that information, you know, that has teeth to it, that just extends beyond just my opinion, because everyone has an opinion, and I'm not the end all be all. I'm not the gospel. And so I think it's really important and critical. So, but it naturally just comes because, again, that's just how I've been trained to write. So
You have this really fine balance between using words to bring in a reader that they can relate to the topic of conversation, as well as having the support and the research and the links to educate as well. And most pieces do one or the other. Most pieces might be too academic and it's pure education, and others will be pure, hey, try to relate, but I'm not going to teach. And you do both of them. To get to that point and to have the level of expertise you have, I have to imagine there are some things that you do in life that put you in the best position to write. Maybe it's sleep, maybe it's coffee. I know from Instagram that you like health and wellness. What are some of these practices that you're keeping to nurture your creativity?
I think, well, it's very interesting. So if you would have asked me this, like, you know, when I first started writing, my answer would have been very different, because when I first started writing on Medium and throwing my hat in the ring with this type of writing, you know, we weren't like in quarantine central, right?
Yeah.
And now life has changed very much. And so my family and I, we are very good about social distancing and staying in the house, especially with us having a toddler. Which also adds a piece to it, because before my daughter would go to daycare from like 9 to 3 or whatever it was, and now she's home with me. And so, you know, writing and then teaching online and doing all those type of duties as a professor with a toddler running around, you know, is a lot. So it's different what I do for my self-care. So now just taking a shower in peace is like I consider that self-care for me to like, say, okay, but it's true. And during that time, I find myself, or just even walking the dogs, I find myself, thinking about, what's going on in the world that I want to write about.
Mhm.
Also, what I do that's somewhat different is I use social media differently.
How so?
So before I started writing on Medium to begin with, I kind of just use social media just to kind of like, pass time and find funny things and, whatever. To scroll when you're in the bed and you're like trying to put yourself to bed to sleep, But now I use it, and I still do that to some extent every now and then, but now I use it more as an informative tool to see, okay, what are some popular things that are going on? What are some trending things that are going on? That might be symptomatic of a larger issue or just a larger phenomena in our culture. So whether it be the Ahmaud Arbery,
Yeah, I read that.
murder, or the anti-lockdown protests, the reopening of the country, whatever it might be, what's going on. So not only social media, and I've always been a glutton for news. But so that might sound like work to look at those things, but it's really not to me. It's kind of like an escape from like being in front of my laptop, actually writing. And then also I would say, playing with my daughter. That is like the greatest form of self-care. I like taking myself away from it. But I think that what really helps me to kind of get into like my creative juices is taking time to myself and really reflecting on, okay, what's going on right now? What's going on and what is that, how, is it speaking to me, And then if I try to write on something and like I keep on hitting walls after like, an hour, I'm like, yeah, no, this isn't for me. This isn't speaking for me. I'm not going to push it. Like, I'm just going to leave this alone.
It's obvious you have your priorities straight, and it's something I admire, and I'm enjoying discovering that from you. And I want to dig in more to some pieces that you've recently written. But before that, just want to take a quick break and we'll dive right back into that. So.
Okay.
I mentioned that Dr. Hoskin's pieces read as if she's giving a lecture. They're performances. And I encourage you, and I hope you have the opportunity to digest some of them. And when we get back, we're going to actually really learn where some of them started and how one started with a hairstyle. But before we get to that, I do want to take a moment and send a thank you to Half Moon Yoga and Meditation. Half Moon Yoga and Meditation came into my life recently, and I'm so grateful for it. I keep a daily meditation practice and actually use a pair of their cushions. I use a flat zabuton and their smaller mod meditation cushion and stack them on each other for a daily practice. Now, to end my days, I use Golden Root. And Golden Root is a caffeine-free turmeric latte mix. I put it with oat milk, almond milk, sometimes just with hot water. And you get all the spices, all the flavors. And it's rare for me that a drink can be so soothing, but I sip those 8, 10, 12 ounces, and it really is a nice way to end a day with intention. So thank you to Golden Root, thank you to Half Moon. Now let's get back in there and hear a bit more from Dr. Hoskin, especially where her inspiration comes from.
Welcome back to The Rough Draft, joined today by Dr. Maia Hoskin. And we've learned a lot about what the first 3 months on Medium might look like. And I want to transition now to some of the pieces you've published. And the first one is I want to take your suggestion, and I don't want to safely tread the issue in shallow waters. You wrote a piece called Blackness as a Commodification, Cultural Appropriation, and Other American Pastimes. And I want to ask you to take us through this. It starts with something very relatable, a hairstyle on a public figure, one of maybe the most internationally known figures. and you brought it down to being so informative, so matter of fact, so educational, while also being so compassionate to the reader and saying, hey, if you didn't know any of this, guess what? Now you know. And you really did educate us as readers. So what was the process of writing this piece like?
It took me a while to write it, to be honest with you. I would work on it for some hours and then I would put it away for a couple of days. Because I really struggle with how far do I want to go with this? Do I want to call out names or do I not? And then I thought, well, why not call out names? These people don't know me. They'll never know me anyway. So who cares? So I called out names, you know? And I do, and it's a topic that really boils me inside. And so through it, I kept on going back and forth, but it was ultimately this decision of, say what's real, or at least my perception of what's real, at least. And so I think it took so long to write it because it was kind of this constant back and forth exercise of me, typing something, then deleting it, like, oh no, that's too harsh, or, because you never know. And, and I also fear backlash, and I don't want to come off as the angry Black woman and all these other, narratives that are playing in my head. But ultimately, I decided, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And this is how I feel. And if we continue to kind of pussyfoot around these topics, this is, it's just more of the same. And so that was really the process of me just coming to terms with, how do I feel? Do I feel it's justified? And how can I express that justification in my feelings around this topic in a way to the reader that is honest, yet still digestible and not completely like, whoa, calm down, lady, So that was pretty much, the process of it.
You do such a fantastic job with that. It really is. It's in another piece you wrote, which is, I believe the title was "Anti-Black Racism is Taking the Lives and Snatching the Souls of Black Men." And you coined this phrase, or maybe you didn't create it, but you're the first person that I've read to say Black trauma porn. And it might have been actually in your piece from May 12th about Ahmaud Arbery. And that was, reading that, it's digestible, but also it is so matter of fact. And if I can, as a friend, even say, don't ever have that fear of coming across a certain way, because what you write about is that important. It's, if someone were to confront you on it, then it's shameful of that person, because these are the conversations that truly are life or death right now. These are the important pieces. So just friend to friend, writer to writer, thank you for writing these pieces.
Thanks, Richie. Thank you.
Another piece you've written, and it was a departure from the more racial social justice pieces, was What We Miss When We Police Our Happiness. And you open up one of your sections saying, this morning, I realized that for years, I've been so consumed with my wants and desires, I was standing in the way of my happiness. Reading that, it immediately grounded me, and it brought me into the moment to say, what am I not observing? What am I not grateful for? What am I not enjoying right now? Did I capture it? Did I get the message you wanted me as a reader to extract from this piece?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I still do it. I still don't believe in my happiness, but yeah, absolutely. And I think many of us do. And it's a bad habit because we miss, my husband and I, we got married in May, and we had a destination wedding in Los Cabos, Mexico. And I the only time I enjoyed in the whole 4 or 5 days we were there I did not enjoy the experience until the day after the wedding. Um, because I was so enmeshed into, oh, this, that I completely, and that's one of my biggest regrets, and, kind of this kind of wishing our lives away and, delaying our happiness. I'll be happy when I make this amount of money. I'll be happy when I move into this home. I'll be happy when I do this. I'll be happy. Well, what about just being happy now? Like whatever you have, being happy with that as it is and accepting it and taking it in and finding the pieces to be grateful in that. And so I think it's definitely been it's a huge ongoing struggle for me. But that piece was definitely written from the heart, just based off of like completely personal experiences that I struggle with.
Is there anything, any phrase or a mantra or something that you use to bring yourself back to that when you are seeking or relying on a delayed gratification? Is there anything that you just do to say, hey, Maia, let's stay here. Let's stay right here?
Kind of, and that is, well, there's a whole bunch of things that I say to myself. I was raised by like a Southern Black woman from Tuskegee, Alabama. So she had all like the Southern sayings that I often pull from. But one is, and it's actually a Bible verse, and it is, as our days are, so shall our strength be.
Mm.
And that to me is a reminder and something that grounds me of, no matter what I'm faced with, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And that in and of itself is enough to be happy about, right? That whatever it is, no matter how ugly it might look or how upsetting it might be, I'll be okay. Like, I'll be able to get through this. And within that, having gratitude for that. So that's one that I often pull from, to kind of just like, you'll be okay, calm down, you'll be all right.
That's such a powerful state of being to move in, where, hey, no matter what happens, I'll be okay. Like, that trust and belief in yourself is incredibly strong. And when thinking about this conversation, what we're going to talk about, I wanted to understand a bit more of maybe where you came from or where you draw inspiration from. And I saw on your website a quote from a woman who has reshaped the landscape of literature. She was an editor at Random House, won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And the quote you have is, freeing yourself was one thing. Claiming ownership of that freed self was another. It's the late Toni Morrison. What does Toni Morrison mean to you?
Oh my gosh. I think you just went over all her credentials. She epitomizes to me this kind of unapologetic strength, to be creative, and to be outspoken and to be brilliant, and to speak your truth, and really, as young people say, and give like 0 F's about it, but not do it in this obnoxious way, right? There's purpose to it. It's not just like, I'm just doing this just to, no, like there's purpose behind this. It's to contribute to a greater good and to open the minds of others and to expose them to different perspectives and realities. And she was a beautiful woman. Just beautiful. Her words, her work. One of the first books that I've ever read of hers was Tar Baby, and ever since then, I've been addicted. And so she's definitely someone who I've always looked up to. Even in undergrad, I thought I wanted to be a print journalist, and so my major was English. And so I did a lot of writing, and that's when I really got heavy into Toni Morrison. And she's just always been a literary inspiration for me. She epitomizes everything that I hope to one day be able to communicate in my work.
There might not be a better role model. Well, one could argue. Dr. Hoskin, we know where you've come from and we know what you've been working on. To end this conversation, what's next?
Well, I've kind of slowed down a little bit on my Medium writing because I've been throwing my hat in the ring, working with other publications outside of Medium. So I've written something with Vox on the anti-lockdown protest. I've written a piece with Healthline about the stereotype, or sorry, my dog, the stereotype of the strong Black woman myth.
Mm.
And I'm actually working on a piece with them right now about Black women and the beauty industry, and the beauty industry really not doing us right. And I'm currently in talks with Forbes and working with them on some things as well, and to create a working relationship with them. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm out there. I'm out.
I
don't know. I mean, I'm just like throwing my, like when you throw a noodle on the wall and you see what sticks.
Mhm.
And so now I'm, continuing. I definitely want to continue writing on Medium, but also working with other publications as well.
You are undoubtedly a name to know right now, and it really, I just have this feeling from reading your stuff, from our private conversation, about knowing the interest that you're getting so quickly and really from the top. So I'm excited to stay in this position as fan 1 or top 10 fan. Maybe there might be some others in there, but we can share the space. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing who you are, for sharing about your writing and honoring your words. I can't wait until we do this again.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The work Dr. Hoskin is doing is that important. And as she said, if we continue to pussyfoot around these topics, then we're just going to have more of the same. So I strongly encourage you to check out the show notes, where all of her recent stories will be linked, and take some time, digest them, educate yourself, relate to them, and continue to follow her work. I also want to thank Half Moon Yoga and Meditation and Golden Root for partnering with the show. Without you, none of this would be possible. And a personal extension of gratitude from my meditation practice and from my evening kind of wind down with some turmeric lattes. So thank you again, and until next time on The Rough Draft, have an awesome day.